My guest for this interview on TYT Interviews is Alex Law, who is running for Congress in the Democratic primary in the 1st District of New Jersey down near Camden. Alex, welcome to TYT Interviews.
Thank you for having me. It's an absolute honor for me to be here.
Okay, I'm glad to have you. I'm not the usual host of TYT Interviews, so I might take this in a slightly different direction, but I'm looking forward to it.
Good.
So you're running in the Democratic primary for Congress in the 1st District of New Jersey. It includes Camden and some other suburbs in that area outside of Philadelphia. The incumbent is a Democrat, Donald Norcross. What are Donald Norcross's shortcomings that have inspired you to primary him?
Well, Mr. Norcross is someone that has voted with Republicans more than any Democrat in the entire state of New Jersey combined, with almost every single controversial vote since he's been in Congress for his one term, having gone with Republicans, things like Keystone Pipeline, things like repeated defense increases, the Iran peace treaty, the GMO Dark Act, and many others. So his voting record has been particularly poor. But even more so than that, he's really the embodiment of big money in politics. He's someone that takes a tremendous amount of money from corporate super PACs and PACs, and has been part of a family that has set up one of the most difficult to contend with pay-to-play systems here in South Jersey. And it's something that has really been a problem for residents in this area, and it's something that we hope to change.
Can you speak more specifically about how that pay-to-play or that the machine politics of South Jersey works against the interests of the people? It doesn't necessarily have to be Donald Norcross. You could give me an example of George Norcross or some other state politician. Do you have any specific examples of how this works against the interests of the people?
Yeah, absolutely. So when Donald Norcross was in Trenton, before he was a congressman, he passed something called the Economic Opportunity Act, which on a very high level sounds like a good idea because it said, okay, let's take areas like Camden that have economic challenges and try to incentivize some economic growth for prosperity for residents. So what ended up happening was $1.1 billion was sent to the city to stimulate economic growth. Now, the problem with that is virtually all of it went to big companies that weren't actually based in the city to get them to move there, which meant it was just moving jobs from the suburbs to the city. But where the pay-to-play comes in, the really damaging, morally corrupt part of it comes into it, is that over 60% of that $1.1 billion went to companies that have either contributed to Donald Norcross's campaign or his family, either him or his brother or his other brother, have a direct financial interest in. And to me, this is a tremendous problem in our democracy that this could happen. You know, further, if we're looking down into municipal governments or county governments in my community, many of them have 5, 6 law firms, 5, 6 engineering firms, many of which have contributed to Donald Norcross or George Norcross sponsored candidates' campaigns, and those people then in turn make sure that they get the contracts. And this is a huge problem for our democracy across the country, but especially here in South Jersey, and something that we're absolutely trying to change. And when we look at what's going on in Camden, essentially what's happening is they're taking the struggle of residents in the city and using it to profit. And to me, that's wrong and something that we absolutely have to change.
That's interesting. I wanted to get to Camden later, but we'll get to it now. First, can you elaborate on that last point you made? How are they using the struggles of the people of Camden for their own profit, other than the example you just gave me, or is that what you had in mind?
No, well, I mean, that's certainly one big example, right? $1 billion is no small example.
Right.
But more so than that, you know, we can look at what happened with the education system there. So Mr. Norcross, when he was in Trenton again, passed a bill that basically said, okay, Camden is struggling in education, so let's try to take some of the dollars and give them to charter/Renaissance schools to try something new for education. Again, on a high level, sounds good. The problem is, many of those dollars have been now sent towards schools that are run and operated by the Norcross Foundation. Now, this is something I don't think should be happening, where someone is legislating something that just sends money to a corporation or a foundation that is run by their family. And the problem is that these charter schools essentially are manipulating statistics so that they get more funding. And what I mean by that is, if kids don't look like they're going to graduate, if kids don't look like they're going to do well on test scores, they're expelled back to the public schools.
Right.
So the public schools are in a situation where they have to deal with less and less funding every year and more challenges, while these charter schools get to go to the news and say, hey, we have a 100% graduation rate. But that in reality isn't what's happening.
Yeah, okay, so it's good points on the schools. I want to move off the schools a little. What other ideas? Camden is one of the prototypical examples of a urban blight, a deteriorated city, a failed city. There are many dotting throughout the United States. What's your vision for what the society and politicians need to do to make these cities livable again?
Well, you and I both know that, Reagan-style trickle-down economics is a failure. And the current model that's being tried in Camden is essentially that. Let's give enormous corporations big tax breaks and cross our fingers and hope that they create jobs for residents in the city. That just doesn't work. What we need is real growth from the middle outward. So to me, if we want to build the kind of economic infrastructure in places like Camden, what we need to do is invest in small businesses in the city of Camden. Businesses that are owned and operated by residents of the city. Because those are going to be the businesses that will invest in the community, that will hire residents of the community, and really create the kind of economic infrastructure that will make those cities attractive for big companies to come in later without a $260 million bribe, which is essentially what these kinds of enormous tax credits to big corporations are. So to me, that's the model that we should be following if we want to improve that kind of economic infrastructure in cities like Camden.
I like the twist you give on it, that you're not against the big companies coming into Camden, but you are against doing it with bribes of using taxpayer money, and you want to start by building a foundation with local small businesses. Because there's a trend, it's now 100 years, 150 years old, of the economy going big, conglomerates being formed, corporations getting larger and larger, small town businesses declining. It's especially true in places like Trenton, Camden. This is a long trend that's almost impossible to stop, it seems, but you do have a vision for how we might be able to reverse that trend to some degree in a place like Camden.
Yeah, absolutely. Because look, here's what happens right now. If we build these huge corporate headquarters in Camden, what happens is most of the people that work there live out in the suburbs. They drive into Camden, they go to a gated facility, they eat lunch there, they spend their time working there, and then they drive home. There's nowhere for them to stop and spend money because there's no economic infrastructure in the city of Camden. And that needs to be built so that the residents of the city can actually benefit from any kind of economic programs that are going on there. And to me, that's what we really need to be doing. We need to make politics more about people, make sure that our government action is in response to the needs and desires of people. I mean, we've seen time and time again studies come out that show that the bills that are passed, whether it be in Trenton or in Washington, D.C., effectively disregard what people want and really only respond to what big money and big donors request of representatives. And that's wrong. And that's something that this campaign is absolutely looking to fight against.
Now we have to solve a little riddle. You and I are talking a lot about Camden here and your ideas of how to approach the urban blight problem in Camden. But if I understand correctly, how your campaign is going or where your support's coming from, it's at this stage mostly from the suburbs, from more well-to-do progressives in the suburbs who might think about politics more than, whereas the machine politics of an inner city like Camden are going to go at this stage more toward your opponent. First, am I right or am I wrong about that? But okay, now you have a vision for Camden. How are you going to bring the people along with you in that vision?
Well, so you're partially right in that analysis, and I'd love this to be an opportunity for me to very briefly sort of introduce this campaign, and for your viewers who might not have heard of us, what's really exciting about what's going on in our campaign in South Jersey. Yes, we have some good ideas. Yes, we're running against someone who ultimately needs to be replaced because of how conservative that he votes and the special interests that he deals with. But what is really exciting about our campaign is the model that we've put in place here, that we are going to effectively win a Democratic primary for United States Congress with less than $60,000, because we have incredible new age data targeting where we're combining that cutting edge new technology with a tremendous amount of old school retail, knocking on doors, shaking hands kind of politics to create this new model which allows for a dramatically lower cost per vote. So when you say our support is coming from the suburbs, that's partially right because our township our district makes up 52 towns spread out all across Camden County, Gloucester County, part of Burlington County. And we are making sure we talk to the voters most likely to vote in the primary. And before you jump in, I just want to say one very important number to understand for those of you at home who are thinking, okay, Alex, you sound smart, but how do we do it? What are the numbers? So the reality in my district is there's 174,000 Democrats. Okay, in the last primary, despite my opponent's money, power, et cetera, he only got 18,000 votes. That's it. So in this election, with a competitive primary, we feel the winner is probably going to get between 15,500 and 16,500 votes. This is a very doable number when you have 150 volunteers, have knocked on 60,000 doors already, made 40,000 calls. But what we need to do, so we're spending our dollars as efficiently as possible, is make sure we're talking to the people that have the statistical highest likelihood to vote. And that's what we're doing in all towns, Camden included.
So this data targeting that you're talking about, and in fact your whole campaign, who leads the effort in the data targeting techniques that you're referring to? Is that you, based on all of your education and experience in the past, or do you have somebody who's in charge of your data targeting and your analytics?
Well, I would say we have a great team here. We have 130 volunteers. We have 8 full-time staff. We have 40 or 50 precinct captains. But the initial idea for creating this data model, a different data model for every single town in the district, that comes from my background. Before I ran for Congress, I was a strategy consultant for IBM in their global business unit. And before that, I went to NYU Stern, the business school, and studied finance and information systems with focus on efficiency models. So that experience has certainly come in handy for this in thinking about campaigns in a different way and using these kind of targeting techniques to make sure that we're spending dollars as efficiently as possible. We've effectively ignored pretty much the advice of every consultant that I've talked to about politics. And I think that's exactly why we're doing so well.
How do you know you're doing well? On what you base that? Is there polling, or is it a sense you're getting?
Well, so a couple of things. So number one, Mr. Norcross has already spent $600,000 against us. In the entire last primary, where he's running against 2 people, in the whole primary season, he spent $300,000. They're getting very, very nervous, and there's some other local things that sort of give us those indicators. We've also gotten access to their internal polling, which their internal polling was not very targeted. They had to change the question about 5 times in order to get the numbers that they wanted to see so that they could hand it to Mr. Norcross and say, hey, you're doing all right. But even with all of that, we are within striking distance on their internal polls, which when we take into account the targeting that we're doing and the people that we're actually talking to, I think it's much closer to even at this point. And we have another 40,000 doors to knock on before June 7th. So we think we're going to be right in this, especially considering that we have an enormous debate coming up on June 2nd, which will be live streaming on our Facebook page, which will be on the radio, which will be on TV if you're in the area, which we expect to have nothing short of absolute victory in that.
All right, so this interview is going to continue, but I want to pause here to give you a chance to tell the audience, which is more national and even international, what they can do to find out more about your campaign or to help. And I'd like you to clarify where they should go, for example, repeat where they should go to watch that debate or to get more information about your campaign. So what can this audience do to help, if anything?
Absolutely. So we have more policy than anyone running for Congress anywhere in the country on our website, alexlawforcongress.com. That's Alex, L-A-W, for Congress.com. We have videos, we have short blurbs, we have a 55-page document that explains my thoughts on every single policy issue and breaks down this race so you can get a good local understanding of what's going on here. So I encourage you to check that out at our website. And of course, you can contribute through there. Our most active social media is on Twitter and Facebook, both facebook.com/AlexLawNJ and twitter.com/AlexLawNJ. Where you can see daily posts, updates, videos to keep up with the campaign. Now, if you want to get involved, we are one of the few people running for Congress anywhere in the country that has a dialer. So at callsforalex.com or from our original website, alexlawforcongress.com, you can go there and make phone calls to Democrats in our district. Our challenge in this election has never been convincing people that our candidacy is better. Our challenge is making sure we talk to enough people so that we get enough votes in this June 7th primary. So if you can contribute, that's great. If you can contribute your time by making phone calls, that is excellent too, because we need to reach as many voters as we possibly can by June 7th, and you can certainly help.
Over the years, we've interviewed many long shots for Congress on the Young Turks, but I don't remember any who have first-timers, any rookies, any people as young as you who have had such an extensive team and such a well-thought-out game plan for how to actually defeat one of these incumbents. So I congratulate you on how far you've gotten so far. It sounds good. as an excellent platform to do well in the primary. So I wanted to talk to you about a contradiction that I have always wanted to resolve. I want to ask everybody about this in politics. On the one hand, we all hear the stories about how Americans don't know anything, how some small percentage can't even name who the vice president is, and nobody knows who their congressperson is. On the other hand, your opponent, Donald Norcross, or any incumbent, has a massive advantage over any challenger. And it seems like everyone knows who he is, and everyone wants to say, yeah, he's my congressman, I want to vote for him. To me, this is a contradiction. Are there people ignorant and not knowledgeable about who their politicians are and what their political system is, or do they actually know? How do you break through that? How do you, in all of your analysis on how to run a campaign, how do you handle that?
Well, I think the reality is that most elections, whether we're talking about for a state house or for Congress or whatever, the overwhelming majority are decided in primaries. And in primaries, we have dramatically lower turnout. So what we have there are the people that do have some base level of political knowledge because they take the time to show up and vote on Tuesday in June or whenever your primary might be. And these are people that have some knowledge, even if it's just, okay, I know who the incumbent is and I like them or don't like them. And this small group of engaged people are often the folks that end up deciding who goes to Congress or who goes to a state house for a much bigger population. So I think when we're answering that question, it is that there's hundreds of thousands of folks in my district that probably have no idea who I am or who Mr. Norcross are, and frankly might not even care. But that small group, that 30 to 40,000 people that have a likelihood to show up and vote in the Democratic primary, because the winner of the Democratic primary in this district will ultimately be the person that represents this district because of the way that the populations are broken down, those people have a outsized say in the representation from this district. And I have a feeling, and not having looked at data at many across the country, but sort of following politics, that that's the case in many places.
So are there any current or former New Jersey politicians who you liked or help you, who you communicate with, who have inspired you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, growing up, I was a big Bill Bradley fan, because I was a basketball player too, so I always admired him growing up. But, in terms of present-day New Jersey politicians that I admire, certainly Steve Fulop up in Jersey City. I think he's doing an excellent job as mayor there, and I know he is rumored to be someone who's going to be running for governor, and if he does, I certainly hope he does become our next governor. I think he's an excellent example of someone who has transformed a city quickly, and really improved the lives of residents by investing in sort of community infrastructure and local businesses and entrepreneurship in his city. So Steve Fulop's certainly someone that jumps to mind.
In my home district, I grew up in New Jersey. For a while, the congressman was Rush Holt. Is that somebody who's on your radar screen? Do you know him?
Oh, yeah. Rush is a wonderful guy. I actually spoke with him on the phone last week. He's been following our race. He's down in D.C. now doing a different job now that he's retired, and he's enjoying that. But Rush has been someone that I certainly look up to. One of our staffers was actually a staffer for Rush before, and she has a Rush Holt bumper sticker on her computer. I see it every day.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, I like the people who are inspiring you, at least. So getting back to the numbers, I was looking at this too. You anticipated it earlier. All you need, based on the primary from 2 years ago, is, I thought, 18,000 votes. That's what Donald Norcross got. You're saying 16,000 this year. On the one hand, that seems like the easiest thing in the world. On the other hand, it's not at all. So talk a little bit more now about how you're running the campaign. How are you going to get these 16,000 votes? What are you've spoken generally about what you're doing, but what are you going to do this afternoon, or what are you doing this weekend, or how's Memorial Day going to play out?
Well, those are some great questions. So the reality is we're very, very busy now, which is great because that means lots of people want to talk to us, lots of people want to hear what we're saying. So typically a day for Alex Law, right? I come into the office, we have a strategy meeting with our team in the morning, we get some sort of internal stuff done, whether it's producing media or it's sending out information to press or to other organizations that we're working with or booking new events. Almost every single evening, I have between 2 and 3 speaking engagements across the district. So, for example, last night I was in Gibbstown and I was in Camden, which was great. But every afternoon, if weather holds, we try to get out there and knock on doors. And when I say knock on doors, this is the backbone and so very important in our campaign, because when we are targeting people, when we're knocking on someone's door, these are people that are extremely, extremely likely to come out and vote in the primary. These are also people that are in our target demographic, which, despite me being 25 and I'd be the youngest congressman elected since 1974, is between the ages of 50 to about 74. And these are people that have lived here for a long time, that are educated on why Norcross is bad, educated on how to vote. They just need a nudge in the direction of a new candidate. And that's why we're targeting them. And the average age of a primary voter in our district is about 62 and a half years old, so that falls smack dab in that group too. So for example, today, I will probably be out in Haddon Heights, which is a small town near our office, knocking on doors to this group that the data model that we've put together for Haddon Heights has said are the most important voters.
All right, well, I'm inspired by this interview and by your campaign. I didn't know anything about it until we started talking here, and I like what I hear, and I want to follow it, and I want our viewers, the TYT audience, to also follow the developments in your campaign. So now we are going to head towards the wrap up. I want to get you to get out and knock on those doors. So let people know how they can stay in touch with your campaign and find out what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can go to Alex Law for Congress. That's Alex, L-A-W, forcongress.com. You can go to Facebook /AlexLawNJ, Twitter AlexLawNJ, to keep up with the campaign. We post on there every single day. And like I said, we have more policy, more videos. We have an auto dialer on our website. It is a completely different campaign than most congressional campaigns across the country. And I really do encourage you to follow us, because if we can prove this model, we can make democracy more accessible for more people all across the country, so that in primaries and other places, you don't need to have $2 million in special interest donors, or a rich parent, or a rich family, or a rich background. You can have democracy accessible to you if you follow this model. And that's why we need to prove it here. We need all of your support so that we can make this happen.
So I don't want to wrap up quite yet. I'd like to know more about what inspired you into politics. What was the environment that forged your ideas, some of your political ideas? Does that come from all the way back in your youth and high school, or did you develop that later in life, in school, in college, or at work?
Well, certainly I had, wonderful parents. My mother, Nancy, my father, Peter. My dad was on the school board, and his dad, Bud Law, was the longtime mayor of the small town that I currently live, which is Collingswood, New Jersey. So public service was always something I was around. I also had wonderful teachers like Michael Kennedy at Eastern High School, who was the most conservative teacher I ever had, but arguably the best teacher I ever had, that sort of pushed me to really think more completely about issues and politics. But how this campaign started was my friends and I were quite simply sitting on a couch watching TV. We saw our then Congressman Rob Andrews being investigated by 60 Minutes for corruption, ultimately given a situation where he had to resign or probably face jail time, which he resigned. We saw a tremendous amount of cronyism and graft locally, and we said, you know what? Rather than sitting at home and complaining about all the things that we don't like in our democracy, we said, let's get out there and actually do something about it. So we did the only thing we knew how. We put together some policy. We made a flyer, not as nice as the ones we have now, and we went out and just started talking to people. And from that very small start, with a very ambitious plan, it's now grown to, like I said, over 130 volunteers, having knocked on 60,000 doors and having us pushed back in a meaningful way against one of the most powerful political machines in New Jersey, and in a position to accomplish something historic on June 7th.
Is there any particular reason why you went straight for a U.S. congressional seat rather than a state assembly or a state senate seat?
Well, I think the reality is we can help the most people by running for this seat right now. Because if you think about the Norcrosses or any political machine, they're like a bully in a schoolyard, right? And what makes them so powerful is not their money. What makes them so powerful is the fact that so many people think that they're invincible. So if we can win this election, beat someone with Norcross at the end of their name, we can show that this political machine is not invincible, take away their major advantage, and then start to put some wonderful people, or make it possible for some other wonderful people to run for local office. And by the way, I have two amazing people running with me for county government, for what we call freeholder here, to try to start that change right now in this election. So the answer is there are so many people that need help now in all 52 communities across our district, and we felt this was the absolute best way we could do it and the absolute best way for us to be successful.
What do you feel and how do you feel when you see Chris Christie standing behind Donald Trump looking like a little puppy lapdog at those victory speeches on the podium?
Well, I mean, Chris Christie is an incredibly unpopular governor here. Obviously, I don't like him. I really don't know any Democrats that do, with the exception of my opponent, who has worked repeatedly with him, has repeated pictures with him and Chris Christie working together, and who, by the way, Donald Norcross has taken over $10,000 from the Trump family, something that we don't let him forget or ignore. So when I see our governor doing that, it's disappointing, but it does give me hope that, our next governor, whether it's Steve Fulop or another Democrat, can do a much better job for our state, and that better days are ahead.
I don't know if that, you definitely don't listen to my advice, what do I know? But Donald Trump is probably popular in New Jersey among everybody, I would guess.
No, not in our district, right? So we have 174,000 Democrats, only 60,000 Republicans here. So he is not popular. Plus, remember, the people that we're talking to are not Democrats at large. Occasionally, we bump into sort of these Democrats for Donald Trump kind of people, but for the most part, we're talking to people who are proud Democrats, passionate about being Democrats, and do not have any love for Donald Trump.
Well, let's do the fun part of the interview. What are your favorite diners and restaurants in your district, in that part of New Jersey?
That's a great question. Well, I got to say, I've been very busy lately, so I haven't had a ton of time to eat out. But if I do, there's some wonderful restaurants on Haddon Ave, whether we're talking in Collingswood or over to Westmont, places like Bricko or Trino. Or if you want wings, you go to PJ's, or in Collingswood, Bistro Di Marino has a wonderful lunch special, or the best Indian restaurant I think in South Jersey, Indy Blue. So I'm very fortunate to be from a small town that is sort of the foodie capital of South Jersey, and I take advantage of it as much as I can.
And you have even less time, I suppose, to pop over to Philadelphia these days. But that Philadelphia is, I guess, somebody else's problem at this point. So you're focused on your district.
We are, but I do have some friends who are running for office in Philadelphia and are trying to make a difference there. And there are some great people over the bridge.
Well, thanks for taking this time to join us. Depending on how things develop with your campaign, I might want to come back to you and follow up either right before or right after your debate with your opponent, or maybe before or after the primary day. So we hope that we can have you back on.
Wonderful. Looking forward to it.
Yeah. So thank you for joining us. Again, the website, is it alexlaw.com?
alexlawforcongress.com.
alexlawforcongress.com. Please check it out. Thank you, Alex. Good luck to you. Keep up the hard work. I really hope this succeeds. Like I said, we've had a lot of, long shot candidates for Congress interviewed on the Young Turks, and most of them are just some guy trying to do it. They're way in the distance, but I see that you have a whole team behind you, a whole campaign. It's thought out. You have a plan. You have a strategy, and I'm encouraged by that. And I wish you the best of success on June 7th.